Welcome to Far Out with Faust. I'm Faust Ticho, and today I'm excited and honored to be talking with an amazing, lovely, luminous human being, Micheila Sheldan. Micheila serves as executive director of the Flower of Life Institute, and that's a nonprofit volunteer organization focused on raising the consciousness of the planet. She is more known for her ability as a trance channel and a medium, though. Micheila has realized that her purpose in this life is to help everyday people and light workers through a very turbulent and significant shift on the earth. Hello, 2020. To accomplish this, she has access to a wide variety of guides, ascended masters, teachers, philosophers, interdimensional beings, and collectives. And Micheila's personal mission, which I love, is to inspire others to live fearlessly, live in their soul's higher purpose. And her story and her teachings inspire audiences to let go of the fear holding them back from embodying their authentic selves in order to create a more meaningful human experience. Micheila, it's an honor to talk to you. Thank you so much for beaming in with us.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So let's jump into it. I mean, let's lay a little bit of groundwork for people who don't really know who you are. Can you walk us through your background a little bit and how the overcoming of chronic pain kind of led you to this awakening of your intuitive gifts?
Yeah. So, first of all, I grew up very mainstream, middle-class family. My dad, I grew up in Detroit area. My dad worked for GM, your automotive family, and Catholic upbringing. I really had no exposure to anything, metaphysical whatsoever in my life.
Wow.
And yeah, so I did just kind of fall into this crazy bout with chronic pain. And it was after the birth of my second daughter, was on that regular conventional Western medicine, call it hamster wheel. For the sake of pain, started on this meditation journey. I really wanted to get off my medications. I just felt like they weren't, helping me. I had all these crazy side effects. I was washing it down with alcohol.
Yeah.
In the night. And right off the bat, I just fell into this crazy astral world where these deep breaths I was taking were sending me out of body, and I was having these crazy blissful experiences, and my world they rocked my world. I just started to notice so many different things happening. I would hear things that were quite profound and things that I didn't really understand, but it wasn't like this light bulb went off and I thought, oh, I'm channeling, because channeling is so foreign to me. I had no idea what that was.
Right.
And at this point I was meditating 3 times a day.
Yeah.
Morning, noon, and night. And so I went in my room, closed the door, and it was this audible male voice that came in and said, I am Jacob.
Wow.
And I hadn't had a name or an identity prior to that. I just had all these ideas, kind of swirling in my head, and it was so loud. I opened my eyes because I thought I would see.
Looked around a little bit, yeah.
I looked around the room, and of course didn't see anybody, but I just felt this blissful kind of buzzy, energy, and I was in this state of just pure joy. And that really was kind of the crux of me diving even deeper.
What do you do it? I'm talking about making your day. That's just what a Christmas present, It's too bad you're like, I can't tell anyone. But, it's so funny. I keep seeing there's such a correlation between kind of like this. I mean, at least from what I see, people who are raised Catholic or Christian and end up having a spiritual awakening, it's such a, and when I was talking to Daryl Anka, who I know, he was saying the same thing. He's like, something like 8 out of 10 crazy percentage of people come from that. Yeah. That's just an interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was great because it challenged me a little bit, because I had, I grew up in the regular catechism after school and, very indoctrinated into the religion, and found out how little I actually paid attention when I had all these, prophets and saints coming in, and I would kind
who
of
are you again?
Like, tell me who you are. What are you about? and they would tell me, and then I would go look it up and go, oh, so it was interesting.
That's funny. So when you were younger, when you were a child growing up, and was there ever any clairvoyance, or I mean, maybe you weren't aware of it, maybe you were. I mean, what would you say?
Absolutely. Now, I didn't realize it until I started channeling. I've always been very clairaudient, which I didn't realize. And I've had this sensitivity with sound, and it's just followed me throughout my life. I didn't realize it was there, but looking back, I know it was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. That's I think that's one of the rarer forms of clairvoyance, although it's so hard to tell. I was speaking to one of my guests last week, and he was telling me how he's Russian, and he's a physicist and physician, and they found a way to test for some of these abilities. And he said that what he found is the people who have them the strongest are the ones who a lot of times don't know it, and the people who are trying to sell their services are usually on the lower end of the spectrum. And I thought that was
That's interesting.
fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we kind of went over how you had this defining moment of contact or breaking through, and communicating on a level that you were not before. From there, were you like, okay, I gotta find out what the hell's going on?
I was testing myself out. I decided to start audio recording, and my thought was, okay, I'm hearing all of this stuff. So what I hear, I'm going to speak into, because, you when you're in meditation, it's really hard to, now I transwrite all the time, but back then I didn't do that. And what really, I guess, caught my attention was my voice would change. So when I would listen back to my recordings, I would hear these subtle changes in the tone of my voice. If I had a guide come in who was more masculine, like a Metatron, there was just almost this kind of lower quality or tone to my voice, and my personality even, might change a little bit. And in the early days of my channeling, I actually did end up taking a course after I was doing it for a really long time, because I just didn't, I wanted to know more. I wanted to understand it better. And I went to a local woman, and she tested me out, and she said, "Oh, you go right to my master class." and she said, "Oh, you have so much ectoplasm. And I looked that up. I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's so gross." But she's right, because early on, I would shapeshift, literally my face. I mean, I was an open eye channel at the very beginning, and my eyes would change. So I would freak people out, So I started closing my eyes because it was a little too.
So wait, what? When I think of ectoplasm, I'm thinking immediately of Ghostbusters and like Slimer and like. So what did she mean when she said that?
Don't Google it. Yeah, no. Well, I believe we all have plasma, which is an etheric kind of elixir that helps us to shapeshift and time travel. Okay, and for a channel, you really are embodying the essence of that being or collective. So they are stepping in and utilizing that etheric field or that plasma to really speak through you as a vehicle. And so, early on, I would really take on the features, the qualities, the personalities of these beings very, very intensely. Now, I think I still do very subtly, but, like anything you practice, it just starts to merge with you and
stabilize, more
exactly. And I started to open up and offer to some close friends. And that was an interesting period for me, where that trust or that that test I was going through was confirmed, because I would bring through things for people that I on the other side of the world that I had no idea
about.
Right. And so that was another kind of level, I guess, of moving me towards and into something that I didn't understand or trust.
The channeling process is very mystified, right? I mean, it's misunderstood, I think, and there's still a lot of fear around it for a lot of people, because there's a bit of surrender involved in it. Can you talk a little bit about the mechanics of channeling? And so I believe that it's something that we all do anyway, you know, whether we are conscious of it or whether we become conscious of it or not. But for people who, you know, just can't quite comprehend what this is, can you talk a little bit about the mechanics of it for us?
Yeah, sure. So for me, channeling is simply blending energies.
Hmm.
For example, in this room that I'm sitting in, all dimensions exist, but we only perceive a very small fraction of those energies based on our speed of vibration. And that's why meditation is often the gateway to stepping into channeling, because as you raise your vibrational speed, the energy that you hold, you're naturally going to match other things or observe other things in your space. And channeling is almost like the, you know, the open door to allow those energies to merge with you. Everyone has sensitivities in some way, and a lot of people are very physical, can feel energetic shifts in the room, or they're empathic, you know, for example. And these are all little intricacies that we have that if we go towards them and we focus on them, they can become a really big part of our channeling process. And that's really all I did, was become very intentional. You know, what am I hearing? Who is this? Why are you here? What are your names? You know, and just practiced it a lot. So, a little trick that I use, and you know, some people really appreciate this, is that I drive my consciousness, my conscious mind, let's say, out of the way. And one of the early on practices was putting myself in a car, a little vehicle, and driving myself across the room, or sometimes in the other room, and sitting myself there, so that I'm in more of an empty container for whoever and whatever is coming in. And that's an interesting process to try, because sometimes you can become an observer. And that's what happened to me, is I am this kind of strange observer of the process, where I can be having a thought over here that's different than what's coming out of my mouth.
What would you say is the most far out experience you've had channeling?
Channeling. Well, I channel the Council of Light, and they are a collective of 12th dimensional beings. And I was meditating one day and connected with them, and I found myself sitting in front of this literal council, like table of all these different beings, some human, you know, some interdimensional. And you know, I'm a very resistant, you know, light worker, let's say. You know, this wasn't something I signed up for.
Right.
So I'm like, hey guys, why the table? You know, there's
are we having coffee or what?
You're right, exactly. I mean, why would we bring a physical table here? And they said, well, you brought that here.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You know, your consciousness, this is how you interpret us, but let's show you what we really are. And we merged into light. So I got to experience what it's like to be a part of a non-physical 12th dimensional council, which is really hard to put words to, but you know, almost just flowing with all of the thought form and the emotion of the entire collective at once, and being in this high state of bliss. And, you know, it really left a huge impression on me that I'll never forget. But I have had a lot of experiences with different beings. I see them now. I've had experiences on ships. Yeah, a lot of really weird and
so were you physically on a ship, or were you consciously on a ship?
I mean,
or was it not clear?
Well, I did have an experience not too long ago on an Arcturian ship, and I was kind of playing with this one, because about a week before I had seen it, I was sitting on my back deck late at night, and I saw this very bright light, almost kind of like a bluish greenish tint that I was following, and I knew it had to be a ship. And I asked it to show me confirmation, and it split into I think there were five or six different lights, and then it merged back together. So it was this beautiful confirmation, and I felt it in my body. Well, I went back out, you know, asking for more. And if you ask for more, you'll get it. You're right. So I was back outside about a week later, and it was the morning this time. It wasn't in the evening, and I was wide awake. I'd had a cup of coffee. I was wide awake, and I always start my mornings outside. And I just started to get really tired. Like my body started to get really heavy. And as it was getting heavy, I saw that light again and I couldn't control it. I just fell asleep. But as my body was asleep in the chair, my consciousness was traveling. I almost saw my body in this tube of white light going up into the ship. And I have experienced a lot of ships that are plasma ships. You know, same theory. We have the plasma in our bodies. A lot of the ships have like a plasma base, I feel, that they operate in. And found myself face to face with an Arcturian mother of mine that I get messages from a lot. She calls herself the matriarch. She's this huge, very, I don't want to say scary, but intimidating energy because she's so massive.
Yeah.
And I had a tune-up, you know, I had a intergalactic activation that day. And then I came back and found myself in the chair and woke up and took a lot of notes about what I had experienced. So I have had those experiences, not often, but yeah, I have had them.
Not often that you can remember anyway.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. I mean, I'm going to give myself away here, but I do feel like, you know, when we dream, when we sleep every night, you know, there's an adventure that goes on that we are mostly unaware of, or that we physicalize in the mind in a way that is understandable, yet likely did not exactly happen that way, you know?
Yes.
But there are these experiences like you have had where it's a little more pronounced.
Subtle quality too.
I was wondering if you've had any experiences remote viewing and what you think of all that.
I haven't necessarily had experiences remote viewing, but I have seen some of the remote viewing technology that our government uses. And it's been shown to me kind of like a plasma technology as well, looking like a mirror shape, where there is a technique that's utilized to project through and not only see what's happening on other sides of the world, but see potentials that are beginning to brew and manifest and ground. And that's something that, I don't know, is if that's talked about a lot in the remote viewing circles, but I do think this is coming back from a lot of ancient civilizations where Stargate or portal technologies, of course, were utilized for very benevolent activities as well as malevolent activities. And we have a little bit of both of that going on the planet right now.
There are some people who speak about, and you know, who will tell you that there is really no malevolent ET, and I don't know if I would go that far.
I mean, a lot of my work does revolve around reptilian consciousness. As a matter of fact, I'm just getting ready to put out the manuscript of my first book, which is all about that. And
Wow.
I had no idea who David Icke was when I first started channeling, obviously. And when I, like many others, when I first awakened to everything that was happening on the planet, I was so angry to see we had tampering with our food and, you know, the genetics of our food and vaccines and fluoride in the water and all these crazy things. And I, as you mentioned, I am a volunteer with the Flower of Life Institute. And one of our goals at the time was to create a conscious action initiative or movement to actually resolve some of these things. And we were banging our head up against the wall. It's big stuff, right? So I channeled about it, and I had this really significant transmission come through about the reptilians and how unless humanity could understand that there was a consciousness that was behind all of this, none of it could ever be resolved, because it's great when we do things in physical, but if we don't hold the consciousness to allow that to stick, and I think that's the problem that we've had for many years, it really isn't going to move us forward. So I do believe, in what I channel is not exactly the same as David Icke. I think that the reptilians on Earth have hybridized with us.
Yeah.
So in fact, we influence everything that happens on the planet in our daily lives and the choices that we make.
Yeah.
Because we're interwound with that. And I think a lot of what's happening on the planet today is derived from past history coming back up again
and
give
again
us
and
an
again.
opportunity, right,
Yeah.
to unwind that and resolve some of these issues. So I don't look at reptilians as necessarily being scary, although I know that they certainly can be that way. Every collective entity, ET, that is malevolent is that way for a reason, because they went through some cataclysm or some war, or there's some resource that they need. It's very similar to us.
Exactly, yeah.
Right? We act out and we do things that are not in the best interest of others because we have some ever-present lack. You know,
or trauma or hurt.
Trauma, exactly.
That we have not healed from.
Exactly what this is. So I somewhat agree with the statement that, you know, all beings are at the core pure and good, but they go through challenges just like we do, and things fall out of harmony.
Right. Yeah, and then they end up a lot like a lot of humanity on the earth right now.
And that, you know, and that's why I think the reptilians actually ended up here.
Yeah.
I think, you know, like the book that I channeled, it really goes into the history of their arrival. They were in a dire place. They were not able to any longer sustain themselves in their star system or create. So they are here siphoning valuable resources and creative energy to keep themselves afloat when they are suppressing us to do so. And that's what we're here to realize.
Right. And there are many of us aligned with that. They've been able to do that, I think, because of the alignment in many humans that, it's like when two forces like that align, it can be powerful, and especially when they come into the status and resources they need to accumulate that power. So I think that, what's crazy to me is when you start to become more conscious of things like vaccines, like the water, like the subtle ways that we are making sure that we don't live long, healthy, and happy lives that most people are oblivious to, and you start to try to tell people about this, people think you're crazy. That's the biggest thing that I run into, that I'm continually shocked by, that somehow, for pointing out, it's like the world needs couples therapy. We need like a third party to be like, no, they're telling you that because they're concerned, because they care and they want you to be safe, not because they want you to feel like you've been fooled or that you're stupid. You know what I mean? It's like we almost need an interpreter.
Well, you're right, because what happens when we awaken is we're vibrating at a higher speed. So we actually are a different conscious vehicle than many of the people that, we were connected to before. And that's the inherent struggle that I see all of the time in private session. It's, it's in couples and families and, friendships, where someone wakes up and they are trying to have a conversation with someone and speaking a different language. And that's why, there's this immediate resistance or, repelling of that information, because it just doesn't find a place to land that makes any relevant sense. And it's hard because we are so well-intentioned, we're coming from such a place of care and concern for others. But I was explaining this to my daughter the other day, because, when I first, had this awakening to chemtrail, I was trying to convince the mailman, and he kind of, and he'd look at me like I was crazy. And, it's like the eternal mother in you is trying to mother everyone else, but sometimes it doesn't come across in the best way. If someone comes to your door and they're trying to convince you that you're going to go to hell because you don't believe in what they believe in, you're probably going to slam the door.
Get out of here, dude.
It's better to live it, and that's what I've come to. I instead of trying to convince others of what I know, I live it. And my family thinks I'm out of my flipping mind, but I will tell you, I see subtle changes in them. So I'm not saying it's because of me, but my presence in their life and what I'm creating and how I'm living has an impact on everything that it comes in contact to. And I think that's a more gentle way of us looking at our lives in attempting to serve, you know, and opening the door for others.
It's more powerful than we imagine. I think it's because it's hard. It's hard, you know, we don't kind of track that change the way we would, like, if, you know, if you win an argument, if that's even possible, or if you convince someone of something and, you know, their eyes are suddenly open, which is a very rare thing. But when you start to embody what you know and what you understand and what you believe, it changes everything around you, you know. I mean, and sometimes it takes a moment or two, but you can see it subtly reflected in everything, which I always find amazing. So I have you ever had, you know, like a vision, or have you channeled ever about like kind of mass alien contact and you know, like there's a lot of talk about AI and it taking over the human race. And I was wondering if you've ever seen or channeled anything about that.
I have. So the contact issue has been a constant question.
Oh, I bet, yeah.
My events, of course. And I will tell you, the guides that I work with, and I work with many, we didn't talk about this, but the Pleiadians, Arcturians, Lemurians, Atlanteans, many, many, many. They're like, they think it's kind of a funny question. They're like, you guys already have contact. I know, right? I mean, it's just that we want everyone else to see what we see. And I think that will eventually happen. I think we're pretty far away from, you know, having alien ships land on the planet and have Pleiadians walking. Well, we already have Pleiadians walking down the street, but, you know, have them commonly known. And it's a vibrational thing. You know, we're not in the vibration that would allow that physical merging to really happen. But that's why we have conduits and people, you know, across the world who are bringing these messages in. And, you know, even people like myself back in the day who are hearing that stuff, but don't really know, you know, what they're hearing yet. It's, you know, contact is here. But in terms of AI, I have had some really interesting messages coming in about that. And you know, give you a kind of a crazy parallel that I just spoke about in a group that I'm working with. So I did a course with, as I mentioned, you know, many of the, we'll call them the Christed ones, you know, ascended masters like Jesus and Mary Magdalene. And they were showing us these dragon gates that they used to work with as a technology, and these even link into Atlantis. A lot of the ancient technologies were based in elements. So they would utilize the frequencies of water and crystal. And that's why the water in our body is a literal technology. You know, it just comes back from many of these ancient lifetimes. They're programmed and they work together. And that's why our health is so bad today, because fluoride in the water, it isn't just something we're meant to physically detoxify. The presence of any chemical in our water bodies on the planet is connected to our energy field, because we are that water. You know, there's no separation, right? So back to the Dragon Gates, some of the messages that came through about them were they were an elemental scanning technology. So in order to allow people to pass into these underground mystery schools and in caves, these dragon or elemental technologies would scan their energy field for intention, or for purity of intention. And I thought, how incredibly crazy is that we are, you know, how and I have these eye scanning devices and you know, all of these things. So it's clear to me that the consciousness of the planet is driving technology, because these things are emerging right now that are very similar in scope to what we've had in ancient timelines. And I think that is good that they're coming to the surface right now, because, you know, we are manifesting, I think, potential timelines that can go in a really positive direction. But it is the consciousness that drives them. So we're the conscious technology, or the keepers of the technology, we'll call it. And that's exactly what happened in Atlantis. We had beings that were not of the highest intention come in and infiltrate the technology, where this was a consciousness raising technology, where it was even described as very similar to 5G. It's
Wow.
creating a frequency field on the, in Atlantis to keep the consciousness high. And so now we have the opposite, where we have 5G coming in to actually lower the frequency of the Earth. But I don't see that as necessarily having to go in a negative direction.
Right.
I even believe that some of the advanced children that are coming to the planet might take advantage of what's being installed right now and turn it around for us in a different direction. I mean, because there's no mistake that 5G is coating our water.
Right.
I mean, that comes back from ancient timelines. It's just put into a lower consciousness right now.
Right.
So that's my take on it. I think it remains to be seen. I don't necessarily believe that AI is taking us in the wrong direction. However, we
may take AI in the wrong direction.
Right. And we have a lot of fear on the planet, and we have a frequency field being created that could definitely carry it in the wrong.
And, it's ironic that these things have been slightly censored, given the reasoning for that. I don't understand how the link between 5G and COVID and how that was declared a red flag and then, shadow banned or whatever they call it. I mean, but it's so fascinating that it was and that it is. And that fear is, of course, like you said, the driving factor, which is always a red flag for me. Whenever it's the march, is being led by fear, that's when I dig my heels in and I'm like, I'm not going with this. I'm it's a big red flag for me. A big thing. Yeah.
I think censorship is really important right now. It's driving New Earth in massive ways, because if the old platforms are going to censor, if the old conventional news is going to censor, people will still be there who buy into that. But those of us who are tapping into a different source are going to drive new platforms and all of these new things that I think are inevitable. But to be honest, I believe we were getting a little stagnant. A lot of us were awakened, but not fully stepping in to what we know is true and right. And this energy is really forcing, we have to make some hard decisions now, on where we're going to be and where we're going to stand. And it's forcing the new Earth forward.
Yeah. No, I love that. And you're absolutely right. It's always an opportunity. And you are seeing other platforms with, true, freedom of expression emerge, which I think is fantastic, because human innovation, will prove itself to be the deciding factor in the end, because, the resilience of the human spirit is everything, and if you don't believe that, try to enslave us and watch what happens. There's a strength of spirit there that I think is strong enough to overcome everything that we're seeing. And I have, great faith that we will eventually, just hope sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
But
I totally agree with you. I think we're heading in the right direction, and there's an intelligence to the process. I think there's a lot of wiggle room when we go into different influences and energies, because we do have free will. And our free will isn't, I think, the end all be all of how things arrive, but it's how we navigate that makes all the difference. So, right now, there's so much instability in the outer world that we're being called to this innate creativity to carve out a path that stabilizes us.
Yeah.
You can see it even in the school situation, for example. That's just one example where, schools are open, then they're closed, and here's the new regulations. So we have to wait for something else, and now they're going to be shut down. They're open again. And parents are having to go around and around in circles. And that's the old grid. And I talk a lot about the grid shifts in my work.
Yes, you do.
The old grid it's just a third dimensional structure. Everything has a structure. But I think that structure is becoming so unstable that it's just going to be like running and chasing your tail. So we are being called to jump out and say, okay, this isn't stable. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to create stable in a new way. And that's taking the steps forward to all of the new things that I think are necessary on the planet that, will be here for the long haul.
Yeah. Again, it's a great way to look at what's happening and contextualize it in a way that's positive, and will create a positive outcome and experience, and I likely inspire many people who may be listening to this. That's the hope, anyway. So I have a fun question that I have to ask you. When you were talking about what happened to you in your experience when you were with the collective, and then they showed you and allowed you to experience what it was like, it made me think of my experience on DMT and ayahuasca, and I was wondering if you've had any experience with that.
I have never done a psychedelic or ayahuasca, and I've thought about it a lot, but to be honest with you, I feel like I go on such a trip that I just don't really, it's just not on my path.
Yeah.
Because, everything that I've uncovered, and I still have some pretty crazy experiences. However, just like anything that we're interacting with, the consciousness, the group consciousness, even sometimes if it's a ceremony, can dictate those things. So it's really hard to say. I have actually done a lot of sessions and done some transmissions about plant medicine. And I think it's an incredible ancient tool that was seeded here from intergalactics. But it is always who is managing and driving the ceremony and the people who come to it, because we make this etheric connection, even though we're having our own separate trip or identity experience, we're all connected as one when we're doing that in ceremony. So I have had some crazy things come up. So I can't say that I've channeled on that specifically. I can't, but I do love, I have had many experiences with the elementals and the elves, for example, which really shocked the heck out of me. I think that earthly beings are just so beautiful. They're like ambassadors to help us really see ourselves in a way that we've never seen before. And that's their job, that's their assignment. So that's what I know. That's where I've been as I dive into nature.
What's your take on the UFOs that we're seeing and the ships and are they three-dimensional? Are they physical ships or are they interdimensional? I mean, what's your take on it?
I think some of them are. I think they're all a little bit different. I think there are physical ships and there are plasma ships, light ships that are operating in a frequency, but not necessarily material. So it varies, really. And there's an interesting difference when you see these ships that's dimensionally focused, I think. For example, the more physical or material ships we know have to operate in a lower dimension. Not that they're, less than or any, there's better than or less than, it's just different choice. So sometimes we can be tuning into a more material dimension and actually, connect with those physical ships, where I think the light ships exist in a different, it's just like that analogy I used, in this room right here, all 12 dimensions exist, but I'm only tuning into the physical material stuff that's really slow in speed. So it just varies, based on the consciousness that you are and the vibration that you're in and what you're tuning into. But my first book, my first manuscript that I alluded to, it talks about the seeding of humanity. Okay, so I believe that humanity was seeded by intergalactics. And they go into some detail about how they hybridized here, and some of them did come in more of a physical material state on physical ships, and others came from light and manifested into form. So I think that's still a part of our experience today.
Yeah.
That we'll experience both.
We are interdimensional creatures, and that's where we get it from.
Right.
So there's a lot of talk about this breakaway civilization, and a lot of people believe that some of the ships we are seeing, and maybe they're not wrong, maybe this is the case sometimes, but I wanted your insight into it. Do you believe that like a breakaway human civilization, and like this, I don't know if you've heard the secret space program and some of the things that Corey Good talks about, as far as like the people who were taken off planet, 100 years ago and started their own civilization, that kind of thing. Do you believe that that is legitimate?
In terms of the timeline split, I mean, I do believe that humans can and maybe will have an opportunity to go elsewhere. I think we see that even, merging with, going to Mars and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's really what, as an oversoul, collective, we're here to experience, because, we are earthlings for a reason. Our soul chose the physical earth to have an experience. And I think we're shifting dimensions. That's what's happening. So when we look at this from a more grounded viewpoint, that structural change that I talked about is so evident, where we literally do have people that were speaking different languages. We can't even understand each other, we're going in different directions. And I think, the pandemic itself is physically putting in the barriers as we go forward, where there will be, factions of society perhaps that are, different polarities. And I think that even as terrible as that sounds, I think it's really purposeful, because, the Pleiadians told me not too long ago that when the tide is changing, when we have these really extreme polarities on the planet, it may seem like we're trying to break off into two different Earths, but actually the vibrational tide is attempting to go one way. It's kind of like pulling a rubber band and letting it snap in one direction or another. And I truly think we are going in the right direction, and there's going to be mass awakenings on the planet. But, the grid shift is really telling. So I talk about the grid, and I'll explain it this way. If you were to be able to see the wrought iron structure of a building, that has to be there for all the floors and the walls and all the furniture, and that has to be stable and has to be able to expand and contract and breathe. And we are the ones that uphold that structure. So as we've awakened and we've changed our perspective, there's been some inequalities, that we've recognized, and things need to be fixed and shored up so we can go in the right direction.
Right.
I don't think that takes us necessarily off Earth. Everything that I've transmitted in the first book and what I've come to believe is that the Earth is here. We're going to be here, but things are going to look tremendously different on the other side of the next 10 years.
Yeah.
This is one of the most incredible timeline shifts. We're going back to times of Atlantis, revisiting the cataclysm there. We've got all this history coming up to, reconfigure and reorganize in every single structure: education, finance, the way we live, work environment. We see it. We're moving towards a fifth dimensional experience. And it's a freer way to live. It's a unity consciousness. It's not a service to self hierarchical model. And so that's what we're going through right now, is the breaking down and the, moving away from that old stuff. So I think it is going to not be extremely easy over the next couple of years, but I'm not necessarily in fear, because I think we're going in exactly the right direction, and we're all here to navigate it personally.
Yeah.
And we're going to arrive exactly where we need to be.
One of the questions I love to ask my guests, and I have to ask you, if you were leaving on a spaceship, and you bumped into a few of our friends who were coming to live here among us, what would be three things that you had to tell them that maybe they were unaware of, that would make their lives easier living among the human race?
Well, the first thought I have is they're aware of everything.
Right. When I was asking you the question, I was like,
I would say that for them to arrive here, and show us more of what they know would be one of the most beneficial things that could happen, to literally take our hand, but to hold us in, the same light that they hold themselves, because at times we know as humans, we make mistakes, and there's a lot of generational patterns that we're still working out. So we still have these blocked emotions and, you know, hurts that have traveled with us for a long period of time. So there's still some things on our planet that are not, you know, as pure and loving as what they're used to.
Yeah.
and I see, honestly, I see human hybrids in session that are like, I can't stand it here because, you know, it's so hard. But to thank, you know, I guess it's hard to say I would teach them anything about it, but to thank them, you know, for the support that we do get and what they've created here. You know, maybe I would caution them to go, hey, you know, this isn't the way you remember it from before, guys.
Yeah.
Things have changed a little
different
bit.
Different timeline.
Hadn't seen.
Yeah.
And so don't
it's like Back to the Future.
Right.
We get to a different timeline. Reincarnation. I know you, and it's clear you believe in it. What do you think happens when we transition, when we die?
I believe that and I think that's changing actually, which is an interesting question to ask right now, because in the old grid, which is that kind of loop where we just cycle in karma, we did come back and replay a lot of earthly lives. I think our reincarnation process was transitioning into, you know, the realm of all that is, and we were able to see through collective eyes, which is very different. It's not a linear perspective anymore. And we see how every decision affected everything else. You know, it's not just in our personal relationships, it's the entire planet. You know, imagine transitioning into this viewpoint where you realize everything you did had an effect somewhere else. And that's why we come back, you know, to utilize, to pick up those things that we really want to change, not because we didn't learn the lesson and we have karma and we, you know, we're now punished, but because we desire so much to actually be able to get our fingers dirty again and do it. But, you know, we're really moving into a fifth dimensional grid system, which is a multi-dimensional experience. And it doesn't require us to replay earthly lives again and again and again. And we may choose an earthly life because we think being human's super cool. But I think more and more we're going to be transitioning into other, you know, star systems and locations. And remember, this isn't linear. We have multiple lives. Everything's now, which is just to add another level of confusion to it.
But I know exactly what you mean.
You know, that we're living is consecutive and goes on. And, you know, I truly believe that this is a really significant time of reclaiming soul fragments. So for example, you may have lived this incredible life in ancient Lemuria, and right now that soul fragment is coming back to you, not because you're meant to do it exactly the same way, but there's some knowledge or some ability there that you're integrating and bringing into the now. And that's how I think we were always meant to work. That's been really suppressed in our DNA as well, is that why live these other lives if there weren't going to be some way to utilize everything from them in every other, you know? And that's really where we're moving to, is we're reclaiming the soul fragments from interdimensional lives that, you know, we're bringing to the earth. And you see it every day. You know, people are like, these incredible healing gifts are coming to the surface, and, you know, new technologies and all of these things, where before we were very limited to the earthly stuff. A lot of times we were pulling from the karmic, you know, dense lifetimes instead of these higher vibrational ones.
And, you know, I think the more awareness that people have of that, the more they're going to experience it and come to know it and come to understand it. So I think it's great that you brought it up and you're talking about it, you know, and that you do talk about it in your teachings and in your transmissions. I love listening to them. So I got a question. I love this question. If your time here was through and you are leaving the planet, and you had an opportunity to leave one jewel of knowledge or a teaching or a mantra, you know, to the human race before you left, one thing that would really kind of help all sentient life here to thrive and live in joy, what would you say to them?
Have more faith and trust in what you planned before coming. Because we have been taught to control so much of what our future holds, when in reality, there's a better plan that we're just negotiating and helping to co-create. So let go of the wheel a little bit more and be present with what is, so that you can enjoy what's in the now. Because if I were to look back on my life at how much I suffered through things that all worked out in the end, I would want to reclaim that time over again.
Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah. And I see it in session. We come with a plan, and it's not so specific as we're going to meet that one person who, we meet. We do have the free will to co-create it, meaning we have preferences and, we have desires. And yes, we do make physical effort, but we're not really meant to effort that hard.
Right. And a lot can happen when we stop efforting and have a little more faith in flow, and allow ourselves to enjoy that flow, even when it seems a little scary.
Usually better than what you're conjuring in the mind.
Yeah. Or efforting in the physical.
Or efforting for it in the physical. We get in our own way, slow it down, we get off on tangents. And if we were just to be present with what we have right now, and I really think presence, and this is something that I'm channeling in my latest course, we learn about this mindfulness presence. It really is just a quantum state where everything that we need to source comes in. So when we get too far ahead and we branch out too far from that present moment is where we begin to trip it up. Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't be talking to you if that wasn't the case, if that wasn't how it works when you allow, which has been a great honor for me to have you on the show, Micheila. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and your story, and for continuing to bring your teachings and messages to the world. We're going to include a link to your website and all that jazz, so that people can explore more of your teachings. But thank you so much for coming on, Micheila.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Appreciate it. Take care and have a great day.